got this chance at seeing you.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and this evening we are going to discuss Congress. With us tonight, Pat Chesbrough, Thaddeus Polhamus, and Mike Bernard. The most recent speakers of the House have been Newt Gingrich, Dennis Hastert, Nancy Pelosi, John Boehner, Paul Ryan, and again, Nancy Pelosi, our current speaker. How do you rank Speaker Pelosi's tenure compared to the above-mentioned white Republican men in terms of how the House has helped the American people? Pat?
I looked at just the Wikipedia of Nancy Pelosi and started reading through the ACA, and she was opposed to the Iraq War, and she's done actually a lot of things. Now, when I looked up Paul Ryan, what I got from him was the tax break that Trump did, which wasn't as impressive to me. And I know Newt Gingrich worked with Bill Clinton, or didn't it, to reduce the deficit or whatever, balance the budget. I don't know about Hastert. Didn't he go to jail for something? I was thinking about him.
Yeah, he used to rape little young wrestlers whenever he was.
So, he really doesn't. And Boehner, I don't know, all I can remember is him crying, and I don't think it's bad to cry, but that seems to be the thing I remember about John Boehner. But I think Nancy Pelosi is very intentional about what she does. I think she's very articulate. And frankly, I think to have a woman as it said in the thing, after 200 years, having a woman who's represents half of the population, it's nice to have a woman and have a little different perspective on the Speaker of the House.
Mike, what do you think about Nancy Pelosi compared to those other guys?
Oh yeah, I'll piggyback on what Pat said. The fact that she is a woman, she's an inspiration to women and girls literally around the world now. That, hey, look where she got, I can do the same thing. Now that said, she's very feisty. She doesn't take BS from anyone. She knows her stuff. She's, for example, where I get from that is that she says, I'm not bringing bills to the floor until I know I have the votes. Now that may be a common theme amongst House speakers. I don't know, but I mean, that's what resonates with me. It's like, well, that would make a lot of sense. Why put something up for a vote if you know you're not going to get there? So, the energy that she has, I mean, she's 82 years old. I'm thinking if I have half the energy that she does by then, I would be thrilled. But yeah, I mean, she is a workhorse. She comes from a political family here in Baltimore, in fact. So she comes from people who know what to do in the political world. Going back to the theme of Democrats trying to do stuff for people, and at least Republicans in the House or Senate, in recent years or recent decades, trying to obstruct no matter what. For me, that ranks Nancy right up there because she's the leader of the people who want to do good stuff.
Thaddeus, how do you rank Nancy compared to those other yo-yos?
Well, gee, I would like to disagree with the others, but Nancy is head and shoulders above all the rest of those speakers that you have named. And what impresses me most about her is that she knows how to pull every lever of power at her disposal. She knows how to play her position. She knows how to rally her party around her. Everything about what she's been doing has been, I think, beneficial to the people's agenda. And as Mike pointed out, she doesn't take any BS from anybody, but she manages, and this is where being a woman really helps. She does it all with a smile. She never stops smiling and says whatever she can that is kind about anybody. And if she doesn't have anything kind to say, she doesn't go sit by me. She just doesn't say it. I like her. I think we're lucky to have her in the position she's in.
My favorite Nancy Pelosi story isn't when she was speaker. This is her second round of speaker, is when she was minority leader right after W won his second term. If you all recall, what W wanted to do as soon as he became president, as soon as he was reelected, was to privatize Social Security.
Yep.
And Nancy got with all her caucus, the entire Democrats, and managed to peel away a few Republicans and stop that from happening. Now, if she hadn't done that, 4 years later, remember what happened? Social Security would have gone down the tubes like everything else went down the tubes in 2008, when we had the greatest recession since the Great Depression. So that's one of the great things that she did that I recall. Citizens United opened the floodgates for dark money to make its way into political campaign war chests. Every 2 years, billions of dollars are spent by campaigns to elect candidates for both houses of Congress. I personally believe this is the biggest waste of money in our entire economy. How much influence does the ability to fundraise have on the way Congress operates in today's world? And does anybody really know what Kristen Sinema does in her free time? I heard that she was fundraising in Europe. Yeah, how about money, Mike? What does money have to do with the way they behave and how they legislate?
Yeah, it's Citizens United for me, I think is a huge mistake in that corporations, companies, and so forth that can pour in millions and billions of dollars are going to do so. They're going to overwhelm the support of the quote little people, unquote. My $25 to this campaign or my $100 to that campaign. And I know the Democrats, for example, pride themselves in finding small donors, lots of small donors. It's like, give your $8. We have 30,000 people that gave $8 to $20, something like that. I've seen campaigns with that kind of style where they're reaching out directly to voters. Now, it doesn't mean that Democrats don't take money from companies, corporations. I'm sure they do, but I think I just think it amplifies the propensity for lobbying for one or two groups, or groups with larger influence, meaning larger money, and that's where we little citizens can get lost.
Pat, what about money in congressional decision making? How much influence do you think it has?
I think it has a huge amount of influence because I don't think they feel like they can keep their jobs unless they court those people. Citizens United, of course, is a lot of dark money kinds of things, which is a little bit different too. And that dark money stuff, they're not supposed to be connected to campaigns in and of themselves, but it gives you the feeling that they might be, but maybe they're not. I don't know, because I've never been the beneficiary of dark money, so that's good. I think the whole system is ridiculous and a waste of money. I mean, think of a candidate in Palmer, Alaska, running for the school board who raises $30,000. The money is just a ridiculous thing, and we shouldn't. I remember Senator when Mark Begich was senator, him saying that anytime he's in the car, he's making phone calls to raise money. So they spend so much time having to raise money to keep themselves elected the next time around that they can't do their job. Their job is raising money, and it's just a bad system, in my opinion. And of course, Citizens United is even worse. And the whole Koch brothers thing and all that is, I read that Koch brothers actually were established. They started donating the big money before Reagan was elected, like in the 70s. And I have the feeling that the reason Reagan was elected was because of like the Koch brothers and ALEC and all that kind of stuff coming in, that kind of money coming in. But
Thaddeus, the ability to raise money qualifies you to be a legislature, or should there be other qualifications in your mind?
Well, I've been waiting for this question.
Go, go, go.
Number one, re-election is not the highest priority of senators and representatives. In many, if not most cases, it is their only concern. The common good doesn't even place a distant second. The getting and keeping of power is paramount to the exclusion of all other considerations. And second, the engine that propels Congress, eschewing all delicacy here, is bribery. We take the curtain back. We don't use nice words for it. It's called political donations. But the mutual back scratching between donors and Congress people is no longer even shielded from the public view. And it's so common that the ethical morass that it represents is almost universally accepted as this is just the way it's done. As to what Senator Sinema does extracurricularly, I haven't a clue, but I'm sure that she prefers it that way.
You need to get rid of your diaper and come out and be able to talk to the American citizens instead of us having to use a flap, a little flap.
It's kind of like hers. It's kind
Sad.
Opinion polls for a long time have shown that the American people have very little respect for Congress. Is this branch actually broken? Thaddeus, you kind of alluded to it a little bit in your last answer. Are there any suggestions for any ways to fix or improve its functionality? I'm going to let you go again, Thaddeus. If the only thing they care about is getting reelected, what would you say could improve their performance?
To address the bad reputation that Congress has with the people, what we need is good, reputable, community-oriented candidates that have a group interest in the voters, representatives from and of the people. Now, I just picked up an article in the Baltimore Sun. Funny that I would read a paper like that, but the head of the Baltimore County Council is proposing a new election system. And it is, number one, there will be some public funding, like matching funds for funds raised. Another is that the only people who would be allowed to make a donation, and it's a much smaller donation than, say, your donation for president, that's like $2,700 or something like this. These council seats, a person could only give maybe as much as $300 or $500 for their donations. And the only people who can do it are the people who are voters in that district. You can't give money across districts. You can't fundraise in Garrett County for Baltimore County executive position, anything like that. They very, very much shrinking the size of the political game. And
Let me ask you this: has there been any lawsuits regarding this proposal? Because that seems to fly in the face of Citizens United.
it does. This has not come up for a vote yet. So surely there's going to be a lot more. I'm looking at it as kind of an ideal thing that if it can be made to succeed in this one little place, maybe it can be made statewide. Maybe it can go all over the country. because I've been saying for some time that I would really like to have a political situation where the only people who can donate money to a candidate are people who are actually going to go into the voting booth and see the name of that candidate on their ballot. So the only people who can give money are people who are going to vote. Now, the people who run corporations are going to howl bloody murder, as you very ably pointed out. We need to do something about Citizens United. The error of that needs to be seen. I mean, whichever justice of the Supreme Court stated that corporations are people, or was that Mr. Romney that said that?
Well, Romney stated it too, but Chief
They said
Justice
it.
Roberts
Yeah.
was the Citizens United.
Yeah,
He wrote the opinion on Citizens United.
established himself as a partisan hack by doing so. If we had people who are running for office who are actually accessible to the people, that they're not somebody off in the distance somewhere, they're your neighbors. You can actually walk up to your representative in the supermarket and say, hey, good job, how's it going? And what's happening on whatever my favorite issue is. And instead of, well, the only way I get to talk to him is if I, ante up $10,000 for his fundraising dinner.
Pat, you have any suggestions on how to make it better? I think that is a suggestion. Is a great one.
I think it's a great suggestion too. We do have the opportunity in Alaska to be able to walk up to our people though and talk to them, and because it is so small. But I went actually back to some little different kinds of things. I totally agree. I think the whole fundraising thing is a huge issue, but there's some issues, and I'll go back and talk to this paper, the Reclamation of the U.S. Congress again. A lot of the things, because they actually don't do their job well. They actually, for example, one of the things that talks about in this is that they don't do oversight of the spending the way they should. So that, when we talk about, too much, waste and all that kind of stuff, they don't do the kind of oversight that they should, not just of any new thing that they're trying to accomplish, but say the military, say the things that they just do every year. There should be kind of looking at that. And they actually did it for a while. But to be able to establish a system where they're actually doing the oversight of how the money is spent, is it spent correctly? And is it getting the result we intended to get when we did it? I think all of those things are really important. And one of the things this paper said is one of the reasons that they are looked upon with askance is that people don't know that whatever money goes to them makes any difference to anything. So I think that's one of the things that could happen. This is actually a pretty interesting little paper. And they also, the other thing is that I thought was good is that require the parties and major caucuses publish their legislative policy agendas at the beginning of each Congress. What are we trying to do in this party? What are we doing in this caucus? So that it's clear. And if it's just, we want all the Democrats to look bad, then that's very clear. So I think there's some things that actually could be done that would allow us to put more trust back, if we ever had any, back into the Congress.
Well, to your point about the oversight of the money, the American Rescue Plan, which was one of the first things that occurred in the Biden administration, I had a whole bunch of money devoted to housing that got tied up in the states and never made it to the landlords or the tenants. And there were people that, they're screaming about, we have to evict these people. But the money was there, but it just sat there in the states because there was no, what you said, oversight. Michael, any fix you have in mind here for this congressional situation?
Yeah, there was an article from the Georgetown Public Policy that had a lot of little internal things that should be fixed. that seemed really good. So, and it's just stuff like this. They're saying force congressional committees to debate and break down bills. So apparently they don't do that as much now. Shorten election campaign periods. So Congress people have energy and time to focus on their jobs. That was touched on a little earlier. Implement a 5-day work week and force Congress to work more hours together. I thought that was a great one. Provide more congressional research staff to lessen reliance on lobbyists. There's a filibuster reform idea that they said. They said an idea is to, instead of requiring 60 votes for a bill to be voted upon, require 41 votes to invoke a filibuster against a bill. So in other words, if they can't get 41 people to say, oh, no, well then let it go, let it vote. So I thought that was a great idea. And it says, let the minority speak and express their ideas and be heard. But acknowledge that, if you don't have the majority, you just don't. And then there's something called filling the amendment tree. Apparently when bills are put forth, you can file 11 amendments. And apparently what happens is the majority party will file the 11 amendments right away without even letting the minority party say a word. And so, little practical things like that it sounds like that would go a long way if they'll do it. Who knows, will they? But it's all that process stuff. I think it makes a lot of good sense.
From what was that, from the Georgetown publication?
Georgetown Policy Review is an article from 2 articles in April.
Okay.
Hey, get down off that stage. We've heard everything you've got to say. Come on, man, get off the stage.
In the 1994 midterm elections, Republicans gained control of the House for the first time in 46 years, running on a platform called A Contract with America. Upon taking office, that 104th Congress passed every plank listed in the contract except for term limits, which was the one that got them elected in the first place. We have some pitiful examples of perpetually elected members. Chuck Grassley, Dianne Feinstein, Pat Leahy, Don Young from Alaska. How do you feel about term limits, good or bad? Mike, I'll let you take that one. Term limits a good thing, or do you think that would not be such a good thing?
Potentially, yes. I think there should be some term limits. Now, I would say give the Senate maybe 2 or 3 terms, the House 8 or 9 terms. In other words, a maximum of about 20 years or so, 15 to 20 years. Because my fear otherwise is that for many, just the inertia of being in the same job over and over and over and over, ideas are going to atrophy. There's not going to be fresh thoughts. And, yes, there are some fantastic Congress people that serve decades and they've done great work. But I always like the idea of new blood and rotation of service. So yes, I think at least some term limit should be there, but give the people who are in there at least some years to get to know the job and to do really good stuff, and then let someone else in.
Thaddeus, give them a chance to do some good work and then get them out. What do you think?
That sounds like a good idea to me. My feeling about term limits are both good and bad. And I've got 3 names for you that will say either good or bad about people who have benefited by not having term limits. And those 3 names are Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden. They are all extremely well seasoned. They all know their way around Washington. They know how everything works, and they know how to pull the levers of power. And some do it for good and some do it for ill. And I won't say who's who, but there are good things to be had from term limits, not just shortening their time there, so people don't go into their doddering 90s still on the House floor. But it seems that there has to be a time, especially when we depend so much, or they depend so much, on raising funds for their reelection, that they can't really get the job done. Well, give them a time when they are not considering reelection. And then they can do a better job of getting the job done. They can actually vote according to their conscience instead of what's going to please my donors the most. So, yeah, the most important term of anyone is going to be his or her last term in office, because that's when they are free, completely free to do the job that they were hired to do. And so,
or free to kick back and do nothing at all as well.
well, yeah, but we're hoping that the people who are in office are of goodwill and are there to do service. And if they're going to kick back and do nothing, they probably have done as little as they could in their previous terms. So the fact that they kick back and do nothing means that they're probably not going to do too much harm. So term limits, I am for fewer terms, probably longer terms. I don't think anybody can get anything done as a congressperson in 2 years. That's how long it takes you to learn to get around Washington, D.C.
Just the Capitol building.
Yeah, without a map. So, yeah, you need to have more time, even for one term. So I would reconsider the length of people's terms and have fewer ones. So there are fewer people, a larger portion of the Congress is in its last term. There are more people in Congress who are in their last term and free to do what the country needs of them.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at the body politic there, Pat. If they're in their last term, maybe they'll do something for the people instead of just trying to do something for themselves. What's your take on term limits?
So maybe that's why Don Young voted for the infrastructure bill, huh?
Well, is this it for him?
Well, he says not, but what's going on is they're positioning Nick Begich, who is the grandson of Nick Begich, who died in the plane crash, but not a Democrat. They're positioning him. So, or this is the story I've heard from Tom Begich. They're positioning him to slide in there when Young kind of just sort of towards the end decides not to run. And Don Young's been there for 40 some odd years, whatever, long
I think
time.
he's the longest serving.
Yeah.
Of anybody there. Yeah.
And one would say that he hasn't been serving very much lately because he hasn't had a committee chairpersonship in a long time. Maybe that's why he was able to vote for the infrastructure bill. I do think term limits are important. And I think Thaddeus has a good point that then they don't have to raise all that money for the next time that they come. I do think it takes you a little while to learn a job, any job, and 2 years probably isn't enough with as complex a job as that. And going back to what Mike said earlier, I think it's really important to have people who are employed not in a nonpartisan way to advise people who just come into town about the huge amount of information they need to be able to access in order to actually look at the bills that are out there and the situations. One of the things it says in this reclamation thing is what we're asking of them is tremendously complex, the kinds of things we want them to be able to know and do. They need to be able to rely on somebody. If it's just a political hack, somebody that just gets in there because their father or their whatever, not necessarily people that know anything. So some professional people that can help them.
So you kind of agree with Thaddeus that they need to have more time on the job, but
Right.
then at the end,
Fewer terms.
Yeah, move on. There are some very damaged personalities occupying seats in Congress. Already mentioned, we're Mansion Cinema, but there's also Ted Cruz, Ron Johnson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Josh Hawley, Matt Gaetz, Madison Cawthorn, Lauren Boebert, Rand Paul, Paul Gosar, who's been in the news a lot lately, my personal favorite, Louis Gohmert, who claimed that he contracted COVID because Nancy forced him to wear a mask, and a host of other complete idiots like Jim Jordan, etc. Can you explain how Congress became infected with this very large number of nincompoops, Pat? How did these people get in?
I think messaging. I think this whole idea of you have the trigger things. I'm against abortion. I'm for, I'm against LGBT. I'm against critical race theory. All those guys are bad over there. I think that that's one of the reasons. I think the messaging is very powerful. It's done universally in my observation with the Republicans, as I said, even down to the school board races here. They're using the same arguments in Palmer, Alaska that they used in wherever and across the country. And I think that that's part of what's going on. And people think that this bombast is actually courage. And we all know that bombast is the opposite of courage. It's being a scared person and not having anything to offer. And so, they totally don't even look at the fact that Jim Jordan has been accused of sexual abuse. They don't look at a lot of the stuff that's going on. And it's sickening to think that but then do people vote? That's the other part. Do people know and do people vote?
Michael, bombastic messaging. Is that why these knuckleheads have made it into Congress?
Yeah, Pat was alluding to it plays on the fears of the people. So, I mean, a lot of people are economically frustrated. They're perceiving their way of life is fading away. For those who don't like the idea that a lot of people from other countries are immigrating here and changing the landscape of our country, they really don't like that. And so those who understand and lock into those fears, rational or not, will play up on those. And I alone can fix it. Sorry, and all that stuff. When you have the the charismatic person that leads you down a path and you don't know where you're going, but it just feels really good to be in that guy's aura. It takes rational thought away. So unfortunately, I think there's always going to be a subset of nincompoops. Thanks, that's a fun word. In Congress, and unfortunately, they're going to be bombastic. And Jim Jordan, for example, he's one particular brand of. I wish his people would vote him out, but God knows they probably won't.
Well, his district is extremely gerrymandered. You should see how those lines are drawn. Thaddeus, how is it that these people get in your mind?
Well, I zeroed in on the word nincompoop. I like that word too, Mike. Nincompoops are stupid. Nincompoops are easily swayed. They are easily manipulated. And they are funded by lots of big money. And we know that big money can make anybody look like anything in front of the people. They can make the TV ads that can make Charlie Brown look like a World War II hero. So somebody from a corporation says, oh, that Gomer Lewis.
Louis Gohmert.
No, Gomer Lewis. This is a young guy. He looks good on TV, and he will do anything we tell him to do. All we have to do is just put the tie and the makeup on him and put him in front of the camera and give him a paragraph to read, and the people will come out and vote for him, and he will be our man in Congress. I think that's where we got a lot of our nincompoops.
From the money.
They were put there
That's right.
by the money operators.
I would just say that I think that's exactly what happens here too. I think they put people in that they can control, and
Mhm.
then they control them. And they say stupid stuff because they're nincompoops. They're not they don't have a good idea of their own. They're not in there for the right reasons. They're in there for the glory, power, whatever.
But when you're president, you can get away with anything. I swear, you just grab them by the primaries. That's all it takes. Grab them by the primaries. It's amazing.
What is your explanation for Trump's complete stranglehold on Republican members of both houses in light of his recent comment that if the 2020 presidential election isn't fixed, Republicans should not vote in 2022 or 2024? How can he make a statement like that and still have them, oh, we honor you, we adore you, you are our Messiah?
We're not going to vote.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Pat?
I think they shouldn't vote. I like that idea. I think that's good advice. Don't vote.
So you say follow your Fuhrer.
That's right. Follow the Fuhrer. If he says don't vote, don't vote.
Okay, what about his complete stranglehold on them? Do you have any explanation for that?
I think he is the best bully we've seen in a long time. I think he plays into listen to what Hitler said and listen to what he says. He plays into the apparent need of people to feel superior to other people, and he plays into the whole victimhood. If those people weren't here, you'd be better off. I mean, he is masterful. He's masterful at that. And then he's a bully. He says to Lisa Murkowski, if you're not loyal to me, I'm going to put somebody up against you in Alaska. He is, and he does that around the country, and people know it. And I think that's why he's got a stranglehold. I think they're all cowards.
Mike. Trump's a bully and they're all cowards.
Yeah, that's about right. It's the same like the last question. When you have a charismatic cult type guy, people are going to be caught up in the emotional flames of it and follow along without even knowing what they're saying. And so, and he's playing right into those old fears. He gets on. He was getting on Muslim folks, on immigrants in general. Playing into the fears of Americans who don't want their way of life changed or the way life looks to them changed. In other words, changing the color of things. That message is so strong because I think the fear is so great in some places. And part of that too is an economic fear. It's like, oh, those people are going to come and take my job, and I'm barely scraping by as it is. And so, yeah, it's easy to connect with somebody who says, oh yeah, I'll fix that for you. Oh yeah, follow me, I'm just the greatest. And then you get this lollygagging in office that did not much of anything at all. So yeah, it's playing into the fears of the people.
Thaddeus, playing into the fears or just outright bullying, as Pat suggests, or something else?
Well, the book of Revelations said something about God allowing the devil to come into the world among people for a certain time and torment us. He'd be a pretty good candidate for that. A bully, and also, being on record as having made over 36,000 false statements. I mean, that puts him right in league with the father of lies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It seems almost preternatural that he has this hold over the people, and that's for the people at large. As far as his hold over the people on Capitol Hill, he knows what their greatest fear is, and he plays into it like gangbusters. And that is the fear, the fate worse than death of having the voters send them home.
Being primaried
Yeah.
by another Republican.
Oh, yeah. Just whatever, by whatever means, not being reelected is worse than death.
Yeah.
What a great discussion. Thank you, panel. Mike, Thaddeus, Pat, thanks for doing all the research. And the next time we come into the corner, we're going to be talking about the two-party system. So until then, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.